It's time, Fort Wayne. Your sports, your station. It's the Sports Rush with Brett Rump. Covering all the topics that hit a nerve here in the Summit City.
Clark, 11 yards, touchdown.
Only on 1380 The Fan and 100.9 FM. Now here's your host, Brett Rump.
The greatest, most interesting, most important person of all time.
You are incredible! Older than white. Yeah, well, you're half right.
What is this, amateur hour?
This is gonna be huge. I think this is gonna be our finest hour.
Just when I think you said the stupidest thing ever, you keep talking.
I think that's the worst thing I've ever heard.
That boy ain't right.
The simplest way to put it, I have problems.
Welcome to the alleged show.
Do you believe in love? Do you believe in love? Do you believe it's true?
Time to put Monday in the books. It is day one of the 5-day work week. Taking you home with the Sports Rush, your daily local sports fix 4 to 6. I am Brett Rump along with Adam Lundy, and we've got you connected two ways this afternoon on the Parkview Sports Medicine text line at 260-447-8500 and on Facebook at facebook.com/1380 The Fan. Coming up this hour, we've got Don Fischer. Our 15 Minutes with Fisch will be heading your way shortly. Of course, Saturday night, we were supposed to have sectional championships in girls basketball, and most of the sectional championships were played around the state.
Yeah.
Had to kind of work their way around some weather issues, but there were 4 sectionals that I saw around the state that did not get played on Saturday night, and 2 of them were in Fort Wayne. It was the Snyder-Northrop game at Northrop and the Huntington North Homestead game at Homestead.
Mm-hmm.
They were postponed from Saturday night to tonight, and so both games are going to be played at 6 p.m. So if you are fans of Snyder, Northrop, Huntington North, or Homestead and want to go to see the girls' sectional championship game, it is at Northrop and at Homestead, and it will tip at 6 p.m., and they also announced the regional lineup.
They did, yeah.
Where
for the North.
Where teams will be assigned for their regional matchup, and the winner of the of the Northrop sectional is going to be going to Marion to play at 4:00 against McCutcheon, who's 23-3, and the winner at Homestead is going to be heading to Marion for Game 2.
All right, Marion it is.
And the winner at Homestead will take on 25-0 Hamilton Southeastern.
Ooh.
So Homestead could have a big one in the regional at Marion next week.
That's scary. I mean, undefeated. That's tough.
And some other area assignments. Warsaw, 23-1. They will be going to LaPorte to take on South Bend, Washington, who is 24-1.
Yeah, we saw them earlier in the season with that crazy game over Lighthouse, I believe.
Yeah. And let's see. Eastside is heading to Jimtown. They'll play a 1:00 regional against Andrean. You've got Columbia City also at Jimtown. They play the second game at 4 p.m. against Lowell.
All right.
East Noble and Norwell have advanced to the Belmont Regional.
Woo.
And they will play Saturday night at 7 p.m.
All right.
Also, Whitko, who got the win over Bluffton to win the Bluffton sectional. Whitko, 20-4, will take on 24-2 Bremen at Caston, and that will be a 1:00 start on Saturday afternoon.
So we already bemoaned it, but it is true that the closest regional will be Belmont.
Yeah.
Most of them are going to be a lot farther than that.
Yeah. Marion, about an hour away. Jimtown, about, an hour. Well, East Side, Columbia City, they were a little closer maybe, but still definitely over an hour, close to an hour and a half.
Yeah.
Let's see. Caston, don't even know where that is, but Whitko has a head start because Caston is somewhere not far from Plymouth, I believe.
It says it's in Rochester, Indiana, Caston High School.
And so that would be south of Plymouth.
Yeah.
And so Whitko's not too bad. That's probably, 45 minutes or so from...
They're like right in between Logansport and Rochester. So that's where they are.
35, 40 minutes for Whitko.
Yeah. But nowhere in Fort Wayne.
But we don't have one in Fort Wayne. Yeah. Belmont, close indicator.
Yeah, shout out to Belmont. Good job hosting that regional.
Those are your regional matchups. 260-447-8500, the Parkview Sports Medicine text line. Of course, the Super Bowl turned out not to be so super as Philadelphia rolls to the win over Kansas City. Game was dominated at the line of scrimmage. It was like the Chris Ballard game where he says, likes to build from the trenches. Well, Philadelphia. And I'll tell you this.
Yeah.
Here's something to think about. Why do these teams end up being Super Bowl participants? I'll tell you why.
Okay.
Because they draft well.
Oh, yeah, they do.
I went back to this last year's draft, 2024. First round picks. Now remember, both Kansas City and Philadelphia had late picks in the first round. Kansas City didn't have their pick until number 28, and I think they may have had to trade up to get it at 28. And you had Philadelphia, who drafted they didn't even have a first-round pick, I don't think. Let me just see if they had any. Yeah, they did. Okay, they had Quinion Mitchell, a corner who was taken 22nd. But Cooper DeJean, who had the pick 6, he was taken in the second round with the 40th overall pick.
Yeah, that was a great pick 6, too.
And the Kansas City Chiefs picked at number 28, late first round, picked Xavier Worthy.
Yep, who was their leading reception grabber, leading in recepting yards, and had 2 touchdowns last night. Granted, they were in garbage time, but he looked good.
Meanwhile, the Colts had number 15, and they took Liatu Latu.
Yeah.
Okay.
Not a whole lot there from him at the edge.
But I'll tell you this, that Xavier Worthy, that dude can play.
Yeah, he can. He can definitely snag the football, no question about that.
260-447-8500, the Parkview Sports Medicine text line. Jalen Hurts, like I said earlier, kind of changed the narrative for me.
Yeah.
I thought Jalen Hurts was one of those guys that in the right system with a lot of support, that if you put great players around him, it would make him look better than he really is.
Mm-hmm.
Last night I changed my tune. Now, maybe it was an anomaly. I don't watch Eagles games that often, but last night, Jalen Hurts made people around him better.
He did, yeah. And he only missed 5 of his 22 passes or passing attempts, and he looked really good.
And some of the completions, the comfort, the confidence, and the fact that he took off running with the football and on the ground really made a impactful difference. Rushed for 72 yards.
Yeah, so he's not just a merchant of the tush push. He can do other things on the field as well.
Exactly. And so I kind of changed my thought about Jalen Hurts. I mean, I'm not going to call him elite because that's overused.
Sure.
And it certainly is like Eli Manning was a serviceable quarterback for a long time, but he did get a couple of Super Bowl titles.
Yeah.
And so now Jalen Hurts, I think he's maybe better than I thought he was, but just because he has a Super Bowl is not a reason to consider him future Hall of Famer and elite status, top 10 in the league or whatever. But he did have a good night, and I do feel better about Jalen Hurts today than I did before yesterday. So
yeah, me too. And it was just really impressive, and we'll see how it goes from here as far as next season. But good performance from Jalen.
Coming up tonight, we've got the Purdue Coaches Show coming up at 6:30. No IU show tonight.
Huh.
In fact, I was told by Don Fischer today that there will be a show continuing, not tonight. It was pre-scheduled not to have a show tonight because travel was already going to be an issue as they head to Michigan State for the game tomorrow night. But that future shows will not involve Mike Woodson.
Oh.
So apparently part of his retirement is that he retired early from doing coaches shows.
Well, that stinks.
Yeah. So I'm not sure what the content is going to be, but we will have to wait and see. But anyway, the IU Coaches Show, not this week. It should return next week. And the Purdue Coaches Show comes up tonight at 6:30. Mastodon's Coaches Show tomorrow night at 6 p.m.
Sounds good.
Everything covered. All right, we got to take a break because, Don Fischer standing by.
Hey, we don't skip on Don Fischer.
No, we will talk to Don on the other side of the break. It's our 15 Minutes with Fish presented by Hoopie Insurance Services. It comes up next on 1380 The Fan and 100.9 FM. Welcome back to the Sports Rush, your daily local sports fix 4 to 6. I am Brett Rump along with Adam Lundy. Don Fischer joining us here in just a couple of minutes. Coming up tonight, not right after the Sports Rush. I guess at 6:30, we'll have Purdue basketball live with head coach Matt Painter. That comes up at 6:30 tonight. Nothing from IU for this evening, but coming up tomorrow, we've got IU basketball in action at Michigan State, as that will have an 8 o'clock pregame on our sister station, WoWo Radio 92.3 FM, while the Purdue Boilermakers take on the Michigan Wolverines. We'll join that game right after the Mastodon's Coaches Show and get you to Ann Arbor for the tip at 7 o'clock. That's a huge game in the Big Ten. Those two teams battling for first place positioning. And so both games, in fact, are big because Indiana could really help Purdue out. I'm sure that's their mission. But that's a big night of basketball. And, of course, the Mastodon's Coaches Show starting at 6 o'clock featuring the basketball coaches, both men and women, and a couple of players that will be joining us for the Mastodons Coaches Show coming up tomorrow night at 6 o'clock. Then on Wednesday, the Mastodons will take on Youngstown State. 6:15 pregame. The tip will be 30 minutes earlier than normal. 6:30 tip, and John Nolan is making the trip with the Mastodons this week, and so he'll have all the action of Mastodons basketball, a game against Youngstown State, and again, second place on the line as the Dons take the court in Youngstown on Wednesday night. Well, it is that time. Each week at this hour, we get a chance to visit with Don Fischer, the legendary Hall of Fame play-by-play broadcaster of the Indiana Hoosiers. It's our 15 Minutes with Fish, always presented by Hoopie Insurance Services. Well, Don, the writing was on the wall. We knew it was probably going to happen, didn't know the timing of it, and kind of got surprised a bit that last week Indiana announces that Mike Woodson's not going to be returning as the Indiana coach. That part, not really a surprise. I guess the question is why the decision just happened to come out a day or two before the arrival of Dusty May in Michigan. I don't think that's a coincidence.
I don't. Well, here's the thing. I don't think it's a coincidence either, because I don't think that factored into the decision that was made in any way, and I believe that. All I can tell you at this juncture, and I haven't been privy to any of the conversations with the athletic director or anybody else at IU that really knows what's going on. All I know is that Indiana has lost 7 of their last 8 ball games, 5 in a row. They haven't looked the part of a competitive team for more than 20 minutes in any ball game here of late. Things look like they were spiraling downhill, which obviously they are. And at this point, I think they felt like the decision needed to be made. Now, and Mike Woodson made the decision, supposedly. If we believe what we read.
Wink, wink. Yeah.
So all I can tell you at this point, Brett, is that this team is in chaos. Obviously with their play, now with the coaching announcement, and what's going to happen from this point forward is really anybody's guess, because you don't know how the players are going to handle this from a mental standpoint, from a physical standpoint, and it could really spiral totally out of control, at least from a win-loss perspective.
I think perhaps this whole situation handled about like the season has been coached. It seemed somewhat chaotic, because we started to get leaks about this, and then it was reported, but there was no official statement. And then here's the other part of it, is the fact the statement came from the university without any kind of quote from Mike Woodson. Now,
right.
If he was truly retiring, I would have expected either the announcement to come from him or at least for him to have a prominent statement within the university release, and that didn't happen. So I think we can both kind of read through the tea leaves here. We can figure this out, that Indiana decided it was time to turn the page, and they're trying to do it gracefully with Mike Woodson.
I think that's a great way to put it. I think the university is trying to handle this in this very touchy situation in a way that allows everything to take place for the rest of the season as it has, for Coach to make his statement at some point, probably at the end of the year. But it does put everything in a situation where it's just up in the air for the players, for the coaching staff, for everybody. And I'm not saying it was handled poorly, because I think, look, Mike Woodson was a star at Indiana, one of the best players in the history of the university's basketball program. And he took over the program late in his career, never had been a college coach. Obviously, at the NBA level, he was a coach on 2 different programs and then an assistant coach throughout his entire career as far as coaching is concerned until he got the Indiana job. And obviously, everyone thought that might be, a home run. It didn't turn out that way, or at least it hasn't up to this point. So all I can tell you is I think they are trying to be very delicate in how they handle this situation. I think athletic department and charged by Scott Dolson has made some decisions based on what they see internally. And at this juncture, that's all I can give you, because I don't know any other news other than that. And I do know that Woodson, with his resignation, or at least saying he's resigning at the end of the year, and the statement that was made, has put a quandary on how we're going to do shows from here on out. Pre-game, post-game, talk shows, those kinds of things. So right now, all I can tell you, Brett, is that everything is chaotic at this juncture, for especially from our broadcast perspective. And we just don't know quite how it's all going to be handled. And we've got a road trip that begins today to go to Michigan for tomorrow night's ball game against the Spartans, who are battling for a Big Ten championship, and they're not going to have any kind of sympathy for this Indiana program, what it's going through right now. And I just don't know how this team is going to perform. And that's the big question mark, because there's still 7 games left in the regular season.
Don, I know that I've seen reports that the money was starting to tighten up, that some of the donors had decided to hold back some of the funding that was coming to the basketball program because they wanted change. Is it that influential? Is that the way it works? Is it fair to think that report might be true?
Well, that could have something to do with it. But I don't think that. I think this decision was made, at least from Coach Woodson's standpoint. I don't know if he could read the tea leaves or not. But the thing about it being done now, something had to occur in my mind. Something had to occur to kind of force this scenario at this point in the season. Was it the team is not performing well enough? Was it the 7 out of 8 losses that they've suffered at this point? Had it spiraled in their minds out of control at this juncture? I don't know. All I can tell you is that this team is not performing. We have seen Miles Rice and Umar Ballo in the last 2 ball games not be much of a factor at all since that Purdue ball game. And
Indiana was better, by the way, Don. I thought Indiana was better when they only had 1 on the floor on Saturday.
1 big? Yeah, 1 big you're talking about.
Yeah, 1 big.
Yeah, there's no question. They played better basketball with just 1 big on the floor at a time. And in the last 2 ball games now, Baldo, who was so consistently good, I think, throughout most of this season, and granted, he had a ball game or 2 that weren't superstar status or anything like that early in the year, but he was a consistently good performer. You don't get double digits rebound average with a basketball player that isn't playing pretty consistently well. And he was doing that, and I think he had 7 straight or 6 out of 7 or something like that, double performances. And then all of a sudden, he kind of hit the wall at this juncture. And again, Malik Renew's coming back at this point in the season and playing the 2 bigs at one time maybe had something to do with that. All I can tell you is right now this team is it appears to me to be chaotic, in a chaotic situation. And the mental side of it, Bob Knight always said the mental is the physical 4-1. Right now for this Indiana basketball team, I think the mental is the physical is 10-1 at this juncture because they're having so many problems.
What, as far as moving forward, what I'm hearing, an experienced head coach, I think they're turning back the clock to what they should have done when they hired Mike Woodson. But there were some other outside influences that directed them, I think, the way they went. But getting an experienced coach, a coach who's had success at the college level, all those things point to certain people. One of them was in town on Saturday, Chris Beard, another. I think there's a list, but I guess my question is, how much of a head start does this truly give IU by having this announcement now and knowing that at the end of the season Mike Woodson is not going to be the coach anymore? Is it a huge advantage? Because I don't think you can do much with that time you've gotten.
Yeah, the question is, who's going to talk to you at this point in their season?
Yeah. If you want a guy that's an experienced head coach, he's working. And I don't know that you're even allowed to contact them without the permission of the university. I don't know how that works.
Exactly right. No, I agree with that. So, again, the timing of this thing is interesting because what forced the timing at this point? Why would you make this announcement now? And again, we're supposing that Mike Woodson made the decision here. That's what it says on paper.
That's what they said, yeah.
So we don't know if that is factual or not. If that's all I can tell you is we'll find out more this week based on what Mike Woodson decides to do from a media standpoint. Is he going to continue to do our pregame, our postgame, our talk shows for the rest of the season? How will all this be handled? And we haven't been notified of that other than the fact that I pretty much know what I think is going to happen at this juncture. But my gut is that something else came down the pike here that forced this decision to be made at this particular time. Was it the wins, the 5 or 6 straight losses here that we just had, the 5 losses and the 7 of 8 last ball games have been losing performances, the way the team is playing? Something had to trigger this. Whatever it was, obviously we perhaps will find that out at some later date, but I don't think we're going to hear about it anytime soon.
So what is the story on the Inside Indiana Basketball at this point?
You mean as far as the talk show?
Yep.
That will not be with Coach Woodson.
Okay.
It will be. There'll be a show. It just won't be with the head coach.
Okay. It's 60 Minutes of Don Fischer.
We will probably have someone join us because I don't think anybody wants to hear me just ramble on for 60 minutes.
Are you prepared to break down spring training? Because that might be what you'll need to. You got to get that film material ready.
Spring football you're talking about?
No, I'm talking about spring training. You got to talk about something, Don. You got an hour of radio to fill.
I may be talking about spring training in baseball, Major League Baseball. We may be talking about spring training in football. College football we're talking about with Kurt Signetti.
Yeah, everything.
We may have all kinds of things going on here. All I can tell you right now is we still will have shows, and hopefully we'll have somebody on them that's outside of myself.
It's a big week. Michigan State up in the Breslin coming up tomorrow night, and that's a 9:00 tip. I'm sure you're thrilled with that. And then a Friday night game, probably even more thrilling. It does give you the weekend, though.
The Big Ten schedule just continues to make me so happy.
Yeah. Your life's a little in turmoil right now. You got a tough schedule.
My life is not nearly as much turmoil as it is in the athletic department.
Absolutely. Hey, always fun to talk to you, Don. Can't wait to find out what new news we'll have to talk about that we don't know about today, next week. But it seems that's the way it's been going. So we'll look forward to listening to your call tomorrow night, Michigan State, Indiana. And talk to you next Monday.
How about this, Brett, for irony?
Yeah.
Tom Izzo tied Bob Knight's record.
Chance to break it.
On Saturday with the number of victories in conference play. The all-time historical leader, Bob Knight, was tied by Tom Izzo in his 30th year as the head coach at Michigan State, I should say. And then he has a chance to beat the record that Bob Knight set against Indiana coming up on Tuesday.
Yeah, it'll be just another side note added to what already is a season filled with side notes. All right.
Absolutely.
Don, talk to you next Monday.
Appreciate it, Brett. Thanks for having me.
Thanks. That's Don Fischer joining us here on the Sports Rush. And, of course, our 15 Minutes with Fish is always presented by Hoopy Insurance Services. You know, you go to an independent agent that can give you a policy from multiple companies, so he can always match you up with a policy that works best for your particular situation. That's Hoopy Insurance Services. All right, we've got to take a break. We'll come back. It is the Sports Rush on 1380 The Fan and 100.9 FM. Welcome back to the Sports Rush, your daily local sports fix, 4 to 6. I am Brett Rump, Adam Lundy in the producer's chair. Kind of interesting talking to Don Fischer and his perspective on what's happening with Mike Woodson. Of course, we can all agree that this was not Mike Woodson's choice. It's almost laughable that does the university really think they can fool their boosters, their fans, the public into believing that Mike Woodson is stepping aside because he's ready to retire? No. This was clearly the university deciding they did not want Mike Woodson as their coach anymore. And I feel like it's a year too late, and I think a lot of fans feel that way. But at least I salute the administration, Scott Dolson, for finally agreeing to make the move. And I know there may be a couple of trustees that were very close to Mike Woodson that may be disappointed in the decision. But they have to be more disappointed in the current state of the basketball program because it's not good. The players are not responding to the coaching of Mike Woodson. A lot of fundamental mistakes. And, one thing about Indiana basketball is it was always built on fundamental play. In other words, they did the basic things really well. And right now, they don't. They don't defend well. That game on Saturday was nothing but mass confusion defensively. Nobody knew whether they were switching a screen, whether they were staying on a screen, whether they're going over the top, fighting through. They did not know. There were constant communication flaws that left Michigan with either open shots or open drives to the basket. And this far into the season, those type of things should be ironed out, and you shouldn't see those multiple times. This wasn't just maybe one guy got in and seemed confused for a play or two. This went on throughout the game. I was watching almost every set. There was somebody that either was slow to react to a switch, and that's, communication. That's following a scout if there was one. Again, Indiana needed to take note that when Dane Fife couldn't communicate with Mike Woodson and Mike Woodson wouldn't listen to Dane Fife, basically shutting him out, that Mike Woodson's ways were probably not going to last long because they were not the college ways, the tried and true. Build your fundamentals and whatever type of sets you run, offensively, defensively, how your practices are organized, whatever it might have been with Dane Fife. But a red flag should have gone up because Dane Fife is a heck of a college basketball coach, and he's been around successful programs that know how to operate, and Mike Woodson didn't want to hear him anymore. Moved on from Dane Fife. And that should have sent up the red flag. And then what about Thad Matta? I heard over the weekend that apparently Thad Matta came in to IU as kind of the overseer of the basketball program. Why? Because Mike Woodson can't handle a college program. So you got to have somebody that babysits him through the steps of handling a college basketball program, things like recruiting, which are necessary. And Mike Woodson was never 100% committed to recruiting. He didn't want to be on the road dealing with the grind. In fact, he lost Braylon Mullins because Mullins said he wanted to go to IU, but IU just did not show the effort in his recruiting process that UConn did. Believe it or not, a team that's, 800, 900,000 miles away, whatever UConn is. Somebody help me with the math on how many miles it is to UConn. But let's put it this way. Indiana's less than an hour away, and Braylon Mullins did not want to go to IU because they never really showed the dedication or interest in him as a recruit. And that's a huge loss for Mike Woodson. And but the fact that Thad Matta didn't have a relationship, he moved on. He got back into coaching and now coaching at Butler. But the point is, the people that really understand how college works and what you have to do to be successful at the college level, they didn't have great communication with Mike Woodson. And the reason was because Mike Woodson didn't want to communicate with them. He wanted to hear nothing of what they had to say. Nothing. Because he didn't want to know about the college way, because he felt like his way, the way he was bringing from the NBA and the pro system, was better. And guess what? It's not. Whether it isn't understood by players, whether players can't adapt to it or execute it, but this team has not executed well. They seem to constantly be confused on what they're supposed to be doing in critical situations, and defensively. Like I said, let's see how it goes at Michigan State. But I can tell you on Saturday, because I paid very close attention to the Indiana defense and trying to see where are their breakdowns defensively. We know they've got offensively talented players, but there's got to be something that's breaking this team apart. Is it the individual, I want mine type of attitude offensively? That will show, and I think there's a little bit of that. I really do. But I also think defensively, lack of communication, lack of chemistry defensively, it just, that translates sometimes in effort because guys get frustrated. And you just saw that Indiana couldn't come up with the stops they needed. Now, they did have a run there where they seemed to be on the same page and they seemed to be on the same mission. And they did a pretty good job for a little while. And Indiana made that big run to get back in the game and give themselves a chance to win. They got it tied up there in the second half, but eventually it fell apart. By the way, the one thing about, and I know we mentioned this earlier, but the one thing about the Anthony Leal three-quarter court shot, which CBS completely missed, totally missed the boat on the importance and significance of that three-quarter court shot by Anthony Leal, which seemed very insignificant at the time because all it did was change the final score from 6 points to 3 points. But the line was 3.5. Can you imagine if you had Michigan and you had a 6-point lead and you had Michigan -3, and then Indiana throws in a three-quarter court prayer at the final horn and beats you. And the Indiana bettors became winners on that three-quarter court shot. It was crazy. But it's time for Indiana to move on. And one thing I found rather interesting is how Don Fischer referred to a couple of times, there must have been something that came up. Now, he addressed the fact that the team has played poorly and lost 7 of 8. He addressed that, lost 5 straight. But I'm wondering if there is something specific he knows that he can't say, but he knows there's a situation, whether it's with a player, whether there's something that he almost seemed like he knows of what happened, but can't really determine how involved that was with the decision or what happened and transpired last week, but he talked about the timing and the fact that it might have been or could have been tied into something else that happened besides what we've seen with our own eyes on what's happening with the court. But I thought that was very interesting how he brought that up a couple times. He threw that little nugget in. And of course, Don's in a situation. We all hear the disclaimer that said the announcers are employed by Learfield under the approval of the university. And so you do have to be a little careful in what you say. Now, Don Fischer's earned enough respect from the university that I don't feel like he considers his job in jeopardy if he criticizes something that happens with the basketball program. But if he does find out something that's somewhat confidential and quiet, he's not going to be the one to report it. That's not his role. But he did mention something happening that caused the timing of this to be last week. And he also seemed to think it was not the fact that Dusty May was coming to town, which I still stand behind. I think that had a lot to do with it. Maybe it didn't, but it just seems like it's more than a coincidence that announcement came out with Dusty May coming to town. 260-447-8500, the Parkview Sports Medicine text line, 260-447-8500. What a big week for the Mastodons this week. Both sides, women and men. The women get their bye week to get rested up and get healthy. And, of course, the big health question is going to be Jaslyn Limbo, the 6'2 center for the Mastodons. She missed most of the Cleveland State game the first time they played with foul trouble. But at least she was able to go a few minutes. Now she's been out of the lineup for a couple of games, dealing with an undisclosed injury, a lower body injury, to give you the hockey phrase. But they I think the fingers are crossed that she's going to be ready to go this Saturday when Cleveland State comes into Fort Wayne at the Gates Center, part of Pink Out Weekend, and plays the Mastodons in a huge Horizon League battle. And so we'll see. But they get the week off. They've got Cleveland State, one of the three power programs in the Horizon. It's really three teams and then the rest of the field. I mean, there's a huge separation. In fact, if you look at the net rankings, there's almost 100 spots between the top three and the next closest team in fourth. But Cleveland State and Purdue Fort Wayne, two of those top three, and that game will be on Saturday, 2 o'clock at the Gates Center. But the men have a huge week because right now you've got two teams just a half game behind them, and the Dons will play both of them this week. They've got on the road at Youngstown State on Wednesday and at Robert Morris Saturday. I will not be on that trip because they'll leave tomorrow. They won't come back until Saturday night. I don't have the time to be able to commit that on the road trip, and so it will be John Nolan with the play-by-play. Tomorrow night, it's a 6:30 tip, 6:15 pregame show right here on 1380 The Fan and 100.9 FM. We'll take a break, and we will come back, wrapping it up on a Monday. It is the Sports Rush on 1380 The Fan and 100.9 FM.
Welcome back for a final time to the Sports Rush with Brett Rump. Adam Lundy wrapping things up here in the studio for Brett as we sign off for our Monday edition of the show. Big thanks to Don Fischer for joining us as he does every Monday for 15 minutes with Fisch. A lot to talk about today with the news that Mike Woodson will be retiring at the end of the season. He will no longer be joining the Coaches Show with Don Fischer on Monday nights. Speaking of Coaches Shows, coming up tonight at 6:30 p.m., we do have Inside Purdue Basketball Live at 6:30 p.m., so about half an hour after our show ends today. Well, that'll wrap things up. This has been the Sports Rush with Brett Rump on 1380 The Fan and 100.9 FM.